We have always learned through questioning and through a recognition of our unique genius. Elders and mentors have always been the ones to stimulate and inspire a deep sense of knowing who you are, becoming fully who you are. And we need to reintroduce that old model in our schools. So one path to that is to begin to bring in some of the sciences around sustainable practices, and permaculture is one of them. And I'm really excited to get to introduce someone who's, I want to call him a colleague, a mentor, a friend. He's someone who I took a class with last summer for maybe 3 hours. And since then, I have really wanted to be able to bring him to Topanga, so I get to do that tonight. Leif Skogberg is the land steward at the Ojai Foundation. Ojai Foundation is a beautiful piece of land that has been stewarded now for about 80 years, and it's been a nonprofit for a long time. And they do a tremendous number of wonderful activities that support counsel in schools, that support rites of passage among youth, and that teach about sustainable practices in design. And Leif has the title of land steward, but having been up there, I kind of get the sense he's also a bit of a charismatic, quietly charismatic leader of that community. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Leif Skogberg.
Well, welcome, and thank you for coming out, everyone. What is a pattern, and what is connection? Because that's the title of the talk, right? Patterns of connection. So a pattern is a reoccurring set of data, or it's also a guide for making something. Like you can have a pattern for making clothes or shoes. And so in permaculture world, pattern recognition and really studying these patterns is an integral part of understanding how to do really good design. Because if we don't understand nature and nature's patterns, then how are we to work in harmony and balance with nature? So a big component of permaculture, raise your hand if you've taken permaculture course or a training, a couple of you, okay. So real quick, the basis of permaculture is, as Paul was saying, this before even you get into the ethics and principles of permaculture, which is a big part of it, before that it's the bottom line is that nature is actually based on cooperation. It's not competition. And there's more reference in Darwin's theory of evolution to cooperation and love than there is about competition. But for some reason, people pulled out the competition piece and really perpetuated that story. So permaculture is, the premise of it is cooperation and working with nature, not in opposition to it. So then once you get past that point, you look at permaculture as an ethical science. It has a foundation of ethics, which are care of the earth, care of the people, and fair share. So, fair share is also initially was setting limits to consumption and distributing surplus, but people think of it most often as fair share. So those three ethics, which also actually line up very well, match up very well with the, and I think actually the founders of permaculture, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, may have drawn from the philosophy of science of sustainability and the principles of sustainable development, which are balancing ecology, equity or society, and economy. So the ethics of permaculture are also very similar to the sustainable development philosophy. They're overlapping in a sense. But basically it's ecology, equity, and economy. And permaculture is also based on these principles of design that are based on nature. And what they did was they studied systems, they studied earth systems, and they studied systems theories and ecology and biology, and they had this vast training, the founders of permaculture, in natural sciences, earth sciences, and they extrapolated what are the patterns that we can really use based on nature to design with those, to use the principles that create some principles of nature. And that's kind of what the principles of permaculture were born from, was a really hardcore study of nature and natural systems through science. So permaculture is also a lot about studying the patterns of ancient cultures and traditions, and what we as humans have been doing for thousands of years. Because more than likely, there's some really useful, wise information from all these indigenous cultures that have become familiar with place for thousands of years, and they have practices and philosophies and cultural knowledge that is not even understood if you try by science. But so it's this combination of modern science and ancient indigenous wisdom, and bringing them together and weaving them. And again, jumping to sustainability philosophy and theory, a lot of people in the sustainability world are emphasizing this approach of balancing ancient wisdom and modern technology. It's not, technology is not going to save us. And same with, going and living in a cave. That's not necessarily the solution. Maybe for some people for a period of time, but, try it out. They might have some awakenings or something. But it's this balance. It's really looking at how do we use what we've created today in this modern technological world and incorporate and integrate what we've learned for thousands and thousands of years. And so I kind of see it as this like DNA strand of weaving ancient and modern. And that's really a lot of what permaculture and good ecological design is about. One of the patterns in permaculture is the spiral. And I don't know if you've all heard this before, but all of you are a spiral. Each one of you is a walking, talking vortex. Did you know that? Anybody know that? Probably a couple of you. Come on. Yeah. So let me illustrate. When you eat something, it spirals through you and comes out the other end. And then it goes back into the soil, goes into a tree grows food and you eat it. And it goes in a cycle like this. Same with water. You drink it, spirals through you, comes out, goes back into the hydrosphere, goes back into nature, gets purified, gets evaporated, goes into the clouds, comes back down as rain. And it cycles. So this big meta pattern in nature is of circle, the cycles, and the spirals. And when you look at these four elements, ancient wisdom, and the four elements in modern science, you can begin to see really clearly, again, with this pattern of us being this toroidal sphere, how we are literally one with everything. And it's, it seems like science is saying that. And in permaculture, that's definitely part of the case. You can see it really clearly with trees as well. I think I remember illustrating this to Paul in the permaculture walk we took, where the leaves are falling and they're decomposing and they're going into the roots and they're feeding the root systems and the trees are growing and pulling the sugars down to the roots and they're spiraling up the water to the leaves. And there's this passing that happens, just like in yoga. I don't know if any of you practice this. The same pattern applies in the wheels of life, the chakra system, where there's a grounding current and a liberating current that goes through the middle of our energy systems. And that's a bit of a side note, but again, it's like how many patterns can you start to put together into this coherent whole understanding of nature and of ourselves? So all these patterns that you see in the natural world that can be perceived and known, whether it's the hexagon of the bees, right? Very efficient way of stacking resources, the hexagon. Just a little bee honeycomb pattern there. Or if it's a meandering river or fractals, like in a tree, the fractal branching of a tree, that same pattern is what watersheds are when the little creeks and rivets come down, rivules come down and create streams and then become rivers. And then those rivers become meanders, and that's another pattern. And the pattern of exploding of stars is a pattern. Same pattern if I had like a rotten lemon in my hand and I threw it at that back wall and it just went, that's a pattern. Everything is patterns. It blows my mind how amazing language is patterns. And again, I mentioned earlier art, and I've seen Del Mar do some flint mapping, and I'd be willing to say I'm not an expert, but a pattern, right? So all these indigenous skills that we've learned from thousands of years in our DNA are pattern language. So in a natural system, the four elements are also, this ancient tradition, are also mirrored in science. So the four most agreed upon scientific cycles of nature are the lithosphere, which is the mineral cycle. There's other names for it, but that's the one I was taught in school. There's the biosphere and the atmosphere and the hydrosphere. So those four cycles, you can look at how those relate to the elements, and you can really begin to understand who we are as a species and how we're one with the natural systems by looking at that, looking at those cycles. And then you look also at science, and there's four states of matter. There's solid, liquid, gas, and plasma, which is fire, basically. It also has some electromagnetic fields and things woven into it, but it's basically the energy coming off of stars is plasma. So that's a pattern to me, understanding our universe. And the interesting thing to me that I find really fascinating, also on a very practical sense, is the pattern of polarity. Because there's above and there's below, and there's yin and there's yang, right? I do some electrical work where I live and work, and it's like there's, in electrical systems, there's the positive, there's the negative, and that's how you create a current that flows, right? And in plumbing, it's like there's the male end and the female end, and you're always just sticking them together. It's like, so anyway, the polarity is really interesting, and it's in my understanding of nature and how everything kind of weaves together. The two elements of fire and air are above, and if you look at it quite literally, they're above the sun and the atmosphere. Whereas the two elements of water and earth are feminine elements, and they're below. And you can start to see how those elements and the qualities that are associated with those elements in natural systems are usually very feminine elements and very masculine elements. And so that's just sort of an interesting little pattern, a little connection that I've been making with the medicine wheel. And then there's often this 7-direction prayer where it's above, the Heavenly Father, the Earthly Mother, and the 4 directions, and then center. The center is the place where it all comes together. And what I'd like to propose, and I think other people are also proposing the same thing, is that there become a 4th ethic of permaculture. And it's sort of taking some of what Ken Wilber works on in his integral theory, but basically there's ecology. You can kind of look at it as concentric rings, the pattern of when you throw a rock into a pond and it makes concentric rings, right? So ecology is the foundation. It holds everything, right? It's the earth. And there's the society that's within that, and our goal is to have equity in the society and a culture, as John Young talks about. Culture is when your society has actually a gel and things that keep it together. We don't really have a culture. Western culture is broken culture because we don't have what really is required to gel things and keep it sustainable. And you have inside of the culture is the economy, and the way I see that is what are the services that people provide? What are each person's individual niches within the systems? So again, ecology, society, economy, and that's modern permaculture and sustainability theory. And what I want to add is the 4th sphere, which is sort of like this obvious one, which is the self at the center, because each individual has the ability to change all the other ones. And the power of one person, one leader, one teacher, to transform the awareness and the psychology and the ecology and the whole game, so to speak, is huge. It's happened over and over again, like Jesus Christ and Gandhi and Martin Luther King and all of these historical figures who became the change that they wanted to see in the world. And that's to me is what integral permaculture is about. It's about balancing not just the ecology repair and the society repair and the economy, health, but also the self, health. And actually, if you're looking at it using one of permaculture's design principle or one strategies, if you're looking at it in terms of zone design, that's the most important because it's the area that's most highly utilized by each one of us. We frequent that area always, and it goes out from there. And some people in permaculture world are calling that the zone 0-0 because your house is zone 0 in permaculture, and then zone 1 is the first area outside that, going out to zone 5, which is like the forest and the areas you don't go to very often. So the zone 0-0, the self. And I actually like to think of it as the 0 point. So there's this pattern. And that's the main point that I want to share with you all is this, that we can really understand ourselves profoundly better by connecting with nature, by being in nature, and like the work that Paul and Manzanita School is doing with helping kids connect with nature and understand natural systems and just have a relationship. A relationship and communication is what is the building blocks for caring, for being a good steward, and for having a respect, whether it's for the self and understanding the aspects of the self, whether it's shadow or light, light or dark, and understanding that I think that youth really need to have the understanding that wherever they are on the wheel, if they need to go introspective and they need to be depressed and they need to feel some suffering in order to fuel their growth, that's okay. This too will pass, right? If someone had said that to me when I was a kid, that would have really helped. So this context of where we are and that everything cycles and spins is, I think, immensely important. And I from everything I've read, I have one of the little brochures and pamphlets from Manzanita School. That's really what is happening at this school, and I hope that we can do it more and more in other places and continue on our evolutionary journey through space. So, thank you all very much for your time.